Chapter 9. Mapping the World and the Stars. Just how did ancient travelers know where they were going? Geography didn't begin with the Greeks, of course. Sailors and traveling merchants from countries such as Egypt and Babylon mapped harbors and other locations essential to their work. But can you imagine how different each person's map would look? Ancient Greek travelers seldom left sight of land, so there was little chance that they'd be lost at sea. Those sailors and traveling merchants did map harbors that they visited as they traveled, though, expanding on the information that earlier map makers had recorded. Just as they did in so many other scientific fields, the Greeks turned a haphazard and scattered practice into a rigorous science, starting with Homer's epic work, the Odyssey. The story of Odysseus is known more for its adventure and battle scenes than its geographical research. But the Odyssey accurately describes much of the eastern Mediterranean coastline and even includes the distances between many lands. Odysseus's ship, the center of the world? Anaximander of Miletus is thought to have created the first world map in the early 6th century BCE. Since he knew Greece better than any other land, he naturally placed Greece in the center of the map, surrounding it with bits of Europe, Asia, and Africa. These land masses were circled by an ocean so that the entire Earth fit onto a tiny disk. Anaximander and his map of the world. Europe, River, Black Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Ocean, Libya, River Nile, Asia. Hecataeus, also of Miletus, improved Anaximander's map. He added many details to the coast, including the western parts of the Mediterranean Sea, where the Greeks rarely ventured. In addition to traveling through Greece and the surrounding lands, Hecataeus relied on reports from the traveling sailors for improvements to his world map. Yet even with this information, he repeated Anaximander's faulty portrayal of the Earth as a flat disk surrounded by a single ocean. The first person to suggest that the Earth was a globe was a man named Eratosthenes. Where in the world is ancient Greece? It's important to know just where ancient Greece was on the map and how vast it was. The mainland of ancient Greece, situated on the Aegean Sea, looks very similar to modern-day Greece. At their most powerful, the ancient Greeks controlled mainland Greece, a large number of islands in the Aegean Sea, and parts of countries that are now Italy, Egypt, Spain, and Turkey. Spain, Mediterranean Sea, Italy, Greece, Black Sea, Turkey, Aegean Sea, Egypt. Eratosthenes and the Deep Well. Eratosthenes, circa 275 to 195 BCE, was a Greek living in Alexandria, Egypt. Not only was he the first person to describe the world as a globe, he tried to measure it. Eratosthenes knew that south of Alexandria, in the town of Syene, there was a deep well in which sunlight reflected off the water at the bottom of the well on one day of the year, June 21st. On this day, and this day only, the sun was directly overhead at Syene. From living in Alexandria, Eratosthenes knew that the sun never appeared directly overhead in that city. However, the closest it came to being straight overhead was also on June 21st, when the sun was 7.2 degrees away from being vertical. Eratosthenes knew this because he had measured the shadow made by a vertical stick in the ground on this day. Eratosthenes thought about the shadows and lack of shadows created by the sun on June 21st and realized that the world couldn't be flat. If the world were flat, the shadows would be the same everywhere on the same date. But what if the earth were round, like a ball? Then two sticks pointed straight into the ground in different cities wouldn't be parallel. Instead, both sticks would point toward the center of the earth. With his knowledge of geometry, Eratosthenes knew that if you extended the sticks in Alexandria and Syene to meet in the center of the earth, the angle between them would be 7.2 degrees, 1/50th of a full circle. Eratosthenes measured the distance between the sticks at 5,000 stades. Remember this ancient Greek measurement from the chapter about the Olympics? If 1/50th of the earth is 5,000 stades, the entire sphere must measure 250,000 stades, equal to about 23,300 miles. The correct answer is 25,000 miles. Eratosthenes' calculations enabled him to argue that the world was round and to come amazingly close to estimating its size. Even so, more than 1,500 years passed before the concept of a round world was embraced. Alexandria, Syene, sunlight. Alexandria, Syene, 7.2 degrees. Anaxagoras. Around 435 BCE, the Greek philosopher Anaxagoras suggested that the sun was a glowing rock larger than the 8,000 square mile peninsula in southern Greece, the Peloponnesus. His claim went against the common belief that the sun was a god. He was imprisoned for impiety. It was feared that this outrageous claim might displease the gods. As the ancient Greeks mapped the world, calculating distance, height, or angles, mathematics came into play. Many of these map makers were also mathematicians, and they developed concepts that were the beginnings of geometry. While not all of the theories held up over time, many of our geometrical calculations have their roots in ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks contributed much to the world of science. They didn't use the word science to describe their efforts, though. The Greeks used other words such as philosophia, love of wisdom, episteme, knowledge, and periphasios, hysteria, an inquiry into nature, to describe their activities. Tracking the stars. Just as geometry helped the ancient Greeks begin to map the world, it also helped them map the stars and planets. Noting that you saw a star in the sky isn't as important as noting exactly where in the sky you saw it. And the only thing better than recording where you saw the star today is noting where you saw it the next day and the day after that and the day after that. Astronomy, that is, the study of the movement of the stars and planets, requires a long-term approach. Words to know. Geography, the science of the earth and its features. Degree, a unit of measurement. There are 360 degrees in a circle. Parallel, side by side, always the same distance apart. Sphere, a globe or object similar in shape to a ball. Impiety, a lack of respect for a god or a religion. Astronomy, the science of the celestial bodies like the planets and the stars. Know your ancient Greeks. Thales. Thales was born around 624 BCE and was the first Greek philosopher and scientist. He thought that you could understand the world by searching for and finding its physis, that is, its underlying physical principle. Our modern word physics, which refers to the science of mechanics, is derived from the Greek word physis. Thales argued that every bit of land, from beach to plateau to mountain, had formed naturally from the water, much the way dirt piled up beside the Nile River each year during the floods. This land formed a flat disk that floated upon the ocean, and the water of the ocean was also in the air all around us. The sun, moon, and stars floated across the sky on this water, then landed far out on the ocean and circled around to return to the east, where they would start again the next day. But wait, there's more. For Thales, water wasn't just part of the environment. Everything in the world, every tree, every brick, every person was also made from water. The earth, air, and all living beings had begun as water, and eventually they would become water once again. Why did Thales believe this? He never wrote anything down, so we're not exactly sure, but Aristotle, the philosopher who was born 250 years later, wrote that Thales noticed that everything living contains moisture, and even heat itself is caused by moisture. Water can change from solid to liquid to gas, so Thales thought that living beings must be made of water because they change forms over their lifetimes. Thales' argument isn't that good, but it's still important because of what it leaves out: supernatural beings. Thales asked questions about the world and looked for answers in nature instead of in religion. The word science wasn't used as we know it for another 2,000 years, but Thales' way of thinking was the start of what we today call the scientific method. To really understand the heavens, you need to study them for years as well as use the records of others who have done so. But why would the ancient Greeks want to study the sky in the first place? By understanding that the sun, moon, and stars followed a certain pattern, the ancient Greeks could begin to predict changes in season. This knowledge allowed farmers to plant crops at the most appropriate times and helped sailors recognize and predict safe and stormy seasons at sea. 800. Thales, circa 624 to 546 BCE. One of the legendary 7 wise men, Thales is known as the first philosopher and one of the first Greeks to study astronomy. Archaic period. Anaximander, 611 to 547 BCE. A friend of Thales, Anaximander introduced the sundial to ancient Greece and is credited with inventing cartography, or map-making. Heraclitus, circa 540 to 480 BCE. Often called the weeping philosopher, Heraclitus believed that fire was the source of all matter and that the world was in a constant state of change. 480. Anaxagoras, circa 500 to 428 BCE. The first philosopher to settle in Athens, Anaxagoras introduced the concept of reason into philosophy. He was imprisoned for suggesting that the sun was a large glowing rock, not a god as we commonly believed. Empedocles, circa 490 to 430 BCE. Empedocles formulated an early theory of evolution and believed that the world was made of 4 elements: fire, water, air, and earth. Classical period, 323. Aristarchus of Samos, circa 310 to 250 BCE. A Greek astronomer, Aristarchus was the first person to claim that the earth revolves around the sun. Eratosthenes, circa 275 to 195 BCE, was the first person to argue that the world was round, and he estimated its actual size fairly accurately. Hipparchus, 190 to 120 BCE, the most important astronomer of his time, Hipparchus devised a system of latitudes and longitudes, calculated the length of the year, and catalogued and charted as many as 1,000 stars. Hellenistic period, 31. All dates are BCE and approximate in many cases. Remember Thales, the clever Greek who bought all of the olive presses and made a fortune? He was one of the first ancient Greeks to study astronomy. He started by using information gained from other cultures. In his travels to Babylon, he ran across tables of astronomical data that recorded eclipses and the movement of the moon over the previous 150 years. From this data, he realized that eclipses occur roughly every 18 years. With this knowledge, he successfully predicted an eclipse of the sun in 585 BCE. The ancient Greeks had many stories for how the objects in the night sky came into being. They believed constellations represented mythological beings and the sun was the god Helios. Words to know: supernatural, magical, or relating to a god. Scientific method: a system of gaining knowledge in a scientific way by formulating a question, collecting data through observation and experiment, and testing a theory or possible answer to the question. Data: factual information. Eclipse: when an astronomical object such as the sun or moon is partially or completely blocked from view by another astronomical object. Constellation: a group of stars forming a pattern or shape. What's in a name? The word planet comes from the Greek language, but what does it actually mean? Greek astronomers noticed that most of the stars were in the same place night after night, but some stars moved. Greeks called these objects asteres planetae, wandering stars, or just planetae, wanderers, and the name stuck. The names are used for the planets today come from their Latin or Roman names. The Greek names sound different, but have the same meaning because each planet was named for the same god or goddess. Greek, Latin, English. Goddess of the earth: Gaia, Terra, Earth. Goddess or goddess of the moon: Selene, Luna, moon. God of the sun: Helios, Sol, sun. God of knowledge or communication: Hermes, Mercurius, Mercury. Goddess of love: Aphrodite, Venus, Venus. God of death or war: Ares, Mars, Mars. God of the sky and storms: Zeus, Jupiter, Jupiter. God of agriculture: Kronos, Saturnus, Saturn. But how the stars moved in the sky remained a mystery. Anaxagoras, a great thinker in Athens, suggested that the sun was not a god as many Greeks believed, but a burning mass of red-hot metal. He was sentenced to death for this claim, but Pericles intervened, preventing the sentence from being carried out. Anaxagoras correctly described the sun and moon as separate objects and even suggested that eclipses are caused by the moon passing in front of the sun and the earth in front of the moon. His ideas were generally ignored. Earth, inner hemispheres of night and day, outer shell of fixed stars, Empedocles' double sphere system of day and night. Empedocles, a philosopher and statesman, suggested that the dark of night and the light of day came from a sphere that rotated around the earth. The sphere was surrounded by a hard outer sphere on which the stars were fixed, creating a kind of star-studded dome above the earth. To him, the sun and moon weren't physical objects, but merely polished spots on the inner sphere that reflected the light from the stars on the outer sphere. Words to know: geocentric, from the perspective of the earth as the center. Heliocentric, the sun is the center. Going around in circles. Just as Greek map makers placed Greece at the center of the world, nearly every Greek astronomer thought that the earth was at the center of the universe. The sun, the moon, other planets, and the stars were all thought to circle the earth, which sat motionless. There was a problem with this geocentric view of the universe, though. For one thing, the moon appeared to change in size during its cycle, which meant that either the moon was growing and shrinking, unlikely, or that the distance between the earth and the moon changed with the seasons. The other planets known at the time, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, also varied in brightness, which meant that the distance between them and the earth must also change. Geocentric view of the solar system. The first ancient Greek to suggest a heliocentric view, that the earth rotated around the sun, was a man named Aristarchus. This suggestion was met with ridicule. Astronomers were convinced that the earth stayed in one place. Do you feel it moving? I don't feel it moving. Hipparchus of Nicaea came up with a theory that worked remarkably well: heliocentric view of the solar system. Using elaborate observations and calculations, he was able to determine the length of the year to within 6.5 minutes. To do this, he kept track of the position of stars and how they related to equinoxes. The equinoxes are the days of the year when night or day are equal in length, usually March 20th or 21st and September 20th or 21st. He combined his observations with information recorded by people before his time to determine that a year-long cycle consisted of just over 365 days. Aristarchus. 2,000 years later, Aristarchus' idea was revived and further developed by the famous astronomer Copernicus. It turns out that Aristarchus, the man ridiculed by ancient Greek astronomers, was right. Activity: Ancient Greek City-State Travel Brochure. An ancient Greek citizen from a distant colony who sees a map of Greece may wonder about some of the city-states on the map. Sparta? Athens? What might they find in such places? Here's your opportunity to explore that question. Use some of what you've learned about ancient Greece to design a travel brochure that would entice visitors to visit your favorite ancient Greek city-state. 1. Fold the paper into thirds. Determine how you'd like to lay out your brochure. Will you situate it horizontally or vertically? What will you put on the front? 2. Imagine that ancient Greece is still thriving. Describe the city-state of your choice, using rich descriptions that would make visitors want to stop at your destination. You can use a real city-state or make one up. Think about why someone might want to visit this particular city-state and be sure to share that information. 3. Add details about some of the famous buildings and landmarks, as well as historical facts. What about the food or events in your city-state? 4. Mention some of the famous Greeks that a visitor might meet in the agora, and perhaps some entertainment that a visitor might expect to see. 5. Add pictures cut from old magazines or drawings of your own to illustrate the brochure. Remember, your job is to sell visitors on the idea of traveling to this part of ancient Greece. You might not want to mention the lack of proper waste disposal or the smells that accompany it. Chariot of Zeus tours. Travel with us and be treated like a god. Tours of Athens, Attica, and Troy available. Ask about our Trojan horse special. Senior citizens discounts available. Supplies: heavy paper, 8.5 by 11 inches, markers, old magazines, scissors. Pictures in the stars. Constellations are groups of stars that resemble an object. The Big Dipper and the Southern Cross are two familiar constellations. To the ancient Greeks, constellations represented the heroes and heroines of ancient Greek mythology. Andromeda. One constellation in the northern sky represents Cassiopeia. Her legendary boastfulness earned her a place in the sky where she could be humiliated forever. How? The constellation appears to be upside down at certain times, which the ancient Greeks would have considered to be quite undignified. Near Cassiopeia is the constellation bearing her daughter's name, Andromeda. This constellation appears to be a maiden held by a chain. Other constellations with ties to ancient Greek mythology are Pegasus, Orion, Heracles, the Centaur, which could represent Chiron, and Pleiades, also known as the Seven Sisters, representing the daughters of Zeus. Question: why did the Greeks study the night sky? All of these constellations and more, there are 88 constellations recognized by astronomers, are still visible today. You might be surprised to learn, though, that these stars aren't in a fixed position. They do move. Because the universe is so vast and these stars are so far away, they still appear very similar to the way they did when they were first discovered. Thousands of lifetimes will pass before there is a visible difference in these celestial pictures. Legendary Greeks, the boast of Cassiopeia. In ancient Greek mythology, Cassiopeia was the boastful and vain queen of Ethiopia. Her claim that she was equal in beauty to the blue-haired sea nymphs called Nereids angered the sea god Poseidon. In his wrath, Poseidon sent a giant whale to wreak havoc on Ethiopia. An oracle prophesied that the only way to stop the terror was to sacrifice Andromeda, the beautiful daughter of Cassiopeia and King Cepheus. Andromeda was chained to a rock on the shore, awaiting the monstrous whale when Perseus, just back from having slain Medusa, came to her rescue. Perseus and Andromeda wed, even though she was promised to Phineus. At the wedding, Perseus and Phineus quarreled, and Perseus turned Phineus to stone with Medusa's head.